Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, it's my honor to be among all of you today. When I stepped to this podium a year ago, I devoted most of my presentation to the comprehensive economic study that the Jockey Club had commissioned last year. We called it the McKinsey Report. The remainder of my talk focused on the medication landscape in North America. On the fan development front, since that time, we've launched many of our initiatives, and we're beginning to witness trends that give us reason for some optimism. As you'll see, television ratings for horse races this past year were up in North America. We've seen evidence that racing is increasingly popular in new and traditional media. Handle, or turnover, is increasing in North America for the second year in a row, and in fact, the last month, we're again seeing about 2.5% increase. So that's some good news. Many of our most prominent race meets have posted improved results year over year, and the talent at these race meets remains solid. In major horse sales, such as the recently completed Keeneland September yearling sale, indicate the demand for American bloodstock again remains very high. Today, however, I'm not going to go into any further details about our fan development programs, which have been generously chronicled at our other meetings, such as the Roundtable Conference and this summer at the Asian Racing Conference. Instead, today I'm going to spend all my time discussing our urgent and wide-ranging efforts in the area of medication reform. But please make no mistake, the issues of fan development and medication reform are indeed compatible. We are acutely aware that any and all marketing initiatives will be in vain if we don't get better care of our athletes, our human and our equine athletes, and offer current and prospective fans a clean game and a level playing field. To do that, we need to reform our medication policies and penalties in North America. And I can tell you unequivocally that today, and really for the past nearly 2 years, this has been the Jockey Club's highest priority. The centerpiece of our efforts is a proposed set of regulations called the Reformed Racing Medication Rules, something the Jockey Club published. This document features a new categorization of medications, more clearly defined regulatory limits, and dramatically remodeled penalties. We first unveiled it at the 2011 Roundtable Conference last August in Saratoga Springs. We updated it last March and provided yet another updated version at our most recent Roundtable Conference. That document has had input from many, including scientists from drug testing labs, veterinarians, regulators, and horsemen, and we've drawn upon the best science and, wherever possible, the best regulations already in existence in the United States and abroad. I'll share some insight into the development of the penalty structure that came after we had studied nearly 3,500 medication rule violations contained in a website that the Jockey Club developed and maintains called thoroughbredrulings.com. These rulings, covering almost 10 years, ranged from a small segment of those involving the most egregious substances, such as dimorphin, something you may have read about in North American reports, to the rapidly expanding segment involving substances that are becoming more chronically abused, such as bute. With 38 different parimutuel jurisdictions, 38 different states, operating from 38 different rule books, quite expectedly, there was considerable variation among the states in how they treated parties judged to have broken rules. Both the frequency and severity varied widely across the states represented in our database. Among the major racing states with substantial year-round racing, infractions were called anywhere from 1 to 50 times per 1,000 races. About 20% of the time, comparable infractions resulting in a fine in one state produced only a warning in another. And among states with comparable infractions involving fines, the amounts varied by as much as 500%. There were also considerable variations among states in their treatment of repeat violators. Repeat violators with 5 or more infractions constituted approximately 1% of our trainers, yet 24% of all the violations and approximately 2% of the trainers had infractions in multiple states. In fact, one trainer actually logged 33 violations and 9 others had 10 or more violations. As my colleague Matt Oliano noted at our roundtable conference a couple months ago, it seems with the current penalty structure in the United States, in many of our states, crime pays. In nearly 3,000 races with drug rule violations, penalties presented little more than a minor inconvenience or perhaps just a cost of doing business, as opposed to meaningful punishment or a substantial deterrent to bad behavior. Here's some examples. Of the 15.4 million earned by horses with drug violations, 14 million in earnings were retained after paying just 1.4 million in fines. And many of those penalties were administered without any suspension at all. Under our reformed racing medication rules, fines in terms of suspensions are dramatically increased, especially after that first infraction. With certain medications commonly used in the management of pain, the purse is redistributed with the first infraction. We did this to address the patterns that we found in the data, such as the nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, or NSAIDs, were among the medications most frequently the subject of multiple violations. 1 in 4 violations of medication rules with NSAIDs will violate those rules again. And in a small segment of the population that we queried of trainers, they would do it again, again, and again. Under the reformed racing medication rules, the picture for multiple violations will change dramatically. This slide compares the actual penalties on the left and the reformed racing medication rule penalties on the right for a trainer who's had 13 violations. $20,000 in additional fines, $40,000 less earnings, and 160 days more in suspensions are the result. And this trainer, who was finally judged with 7 violations, some involving some of the more serious drugs, would have lost all earnings, paid $30,000 in fines, and faced suspensions of more than 300 days. We took a similar approach with the regulatory thresholds and the laboratory standards in the reform racing medication rules. And there, again, we started with the best science, and we looked at the historical trends to identify the behaviors that should be addressed by the rules. Since we announced and published the reform rules last year, we've spent a considerable amount of our time gathering the support of our colleagues in the industry to assist in the advocating for the adoption in various states. That's, quite frankly, the hard work. In August, the Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders Association and the American Quarter Horse Association formally endorsed the reform racing medication rules. A new national uniform medication rule book for all 38 parimutuel jurisdictions in the United States may well be within our reach. To provide a platform where advocates for medication reform could show our support, on May 10th, the Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders Association and the Jockey Club announced the launch of cleanhorseracing.org, a website. To date, more than 15,000 visitors have stopped by the site to receive the latest updates on medication reform, and more than 3,100 emails have been generated from that site by individuals using the site as a vehicle for communicating with regulators in Kentucky, in New York, West Virginia, and many other states. And one of the most popular features of this website is a video testimony from about a dozen folks supporting race day medication reform. Some of these individuals are quite prominent.
We've got to hold hands. The ownership has got to step up. They've absolutely got to hold hands and get it under one umbrella and get uniform medication.
Well, it's very brief. That was Wayne Lucas, a Hall of Fame trainer in the United States. The Jockey Club has met with virtually every major racing jurisdiction in North America to seek the endorsement of the reform racing medication rules and to expand the awareness of cleanhorseracing.org. Some of them are represented on the slide behind me, and to simplify things for those of you unfamiliar with our alphabet soup of organizations, I'll tell you that we're talking to veterinarians, racing commissioners, owners, racetrack operators, national and local horsemen's groups, and to the jockeys as well. And we'll be promoting our reforms at the 4th Welfare and Safety of the Racehorse Summit in Keeneland, which brings together a cross-section of industry stakeholders on October 16th and 17th. That will be webcast, and I certainly invite any of you who would like to participate or get the materials on that to please see me. Beyond that, we're placing advertisements and distributing press releases for Clean Horse Racing, And we've engaged prominent consultants in strategic communications and government affairs, in fact, to further our agenda. The Jockey Club has also consistently lobbied for a gradual phase-out of furosemide, Lasix, in order to accurately assess the effects that a ban would have on the horse and, just as important, on our sport. It is extremely important to begin now so that we can take the appropriate steps and take them with confidence in the future. In recent months, approximately 70 owners who are members of TOBA have pledged to run their 2-year-old horses in 2012 without Lasix. At the Breeders' Cup in early November, furosemide will be prohibited for all of their 2-year-old races. And the TOBA Graded Stakes Committee has plans to enact similar rules. The Jockey Club will continue to espouse its core belief. Horses should compete only when they are free from the influence of medication. And until we reach that point, we should expect more of what we experienced this past spring and summer. The New York Times produced, as Louis mentioned, a multi-part investigative series that centered on the use of drugs and the incidence of fatalities in horse racing. The series was titled Death and Disarray at America's Racetracks. In July, several representatives from racing, myself included, were summoned to a hearing conducted by the United States Senate. It was titled Medication and Performance-Enhancing Drugs in Horse Racing. I can assure you it was not a lot of fun for me or my colleagues that made presentations. But whether it comes from a federal, state, or local level, the Jockey Club is interested in any solution that promotes the adoption of reform rules. When Monsieur Romanet delivered the keynote address at our roundtable conference in Saratoga Springs in 2009, he asked how North American organizations could recognize horses that run on medication as champions. He urged us at that time to, quote, tighten up our medication rules with the ultimate goal of banning Lasix. That was good advice then, and it's still very good advice. Stuart Janney, the vice chairman of the Jockey Club and chairman of our Thoroughbred Safety Committee, struck a very similar chord with his eloquent remarks at this year's roundtable conference. He said, quote, "We have to agree on a goal of ensuring that our sport is as safe as possible and that our athletes are properly cared for. We must also reassure public observers and our fans that we compare favorably to other sports and to the international racing community." So to the international community before me, I can tell you that the Jockey Club has no higher priority than medication reform. We are not satisfied with a scenario in which 1.5% of our trainer population is shaping 100% of the perception of our sport. We cannot accept a scenario in which our medication rules are protecting about 1% of the trainer population, the 1% who repeatedly demonstrate disregard for our rules. We need to make these changes in order for, again, the sport to thrive in North America. And believe me, we're fully committed to that. And we're committed to seeing that done sooner than later. Thank you for your attention and this opportunity to address you.
Thank you very much, Jim, for this very detailed update of the situation. We know that it's not an easy road to medication reform, but we clearly understand all the efforts, the considerable efforts that you are making and the progress which will be made. I want to congratulate the Breeders' Cup, Craig Freville, for taking this decision to start prohibiting Lasix for 2-year-old races. And I think you will win the battle. And I'm sure South America will follow, if not take the lead in this battle, which is, I think, very important for the world of racing and breeding.